Welcome to the Stephen Courson Show, everyone, and excited to have you back. I have a great guest today who I am somewhat familiar with, Mr. Will Watkins, a very close friend of mine. How you doing, Will?
I'm good, man. How about yourself?
Like I said, Will is a diehard Falcons fan, grew up in Georgia. He's a bandwagon Bama fan since he was young because Georgia just sucked back in the day. And I was really worried about him because his Falcons just lost. And I thought he jumped to be a Panthers fan all of a sudden, but that's a local team, so don't judge him.
Baby. Watkins University.
It's all right. You can't. It's a little blurry, but I got my nice Bucks, championship helmet right there in the background.
Didn't Florida lose the UK?
What was it?
Didn't Florida lose to Kentucky?
You're breaking up, Will. I can't hear you. Sorry. I you said something about the Gators. What? No, I couldn't hear you, man. We beat Utah. Yeah. You saw that? Okay, good. All right. Moving on. For those of you watching this, the Gators just got pounced by the Wildcats. I was at the game. It still hurts.
Yeah.
Oh, well, good, man. Well, listen, getting right into it. I want to talk today. Will has a crazy background. There's no possible way we're going to get into all of it. But everything from, growing up in Atlanta, getting recruited by the CIA, playing Major League Baseball, getting drafted, going into corporate America. There's so much to unpack. So we might have to do a second episode sometime because he's a very busy and important man right now. But what
I tell people about the CIA, man. You know, Herschel Walker already got in trouble for that.
Oh, really? Okay. Well, like I said, to whatever NSA agent is listening in on this recording, by CIA, I meant the chief. I don't know what I'm talking about. Screw you guys.
Don't worry about it.
Screw them all. So anyway, that was still my favorite. We just have to jump into conspiracy theories real quick. My favorite conspiracy theory out of all the conspiracy theories recently was when everybody thought the immunizations for COVID and all that, they were going to be putting trackers in them. Now, listen, I'm not a big fan of the vaccinations and the way they handled all that. That's not what I'm talking about. The reason that one was funny is because me and Will both work in the tech world, and we know they don't need it, right? Because they got everything they need right here. So we've seen the inner workings of it. So trust me, they didn't have to put trackers in. They're just fine. So, but I wanted to bring Will on because Will is now the RVP at a big tech company. And, there's a lot of content out there, a lot of people talking about start your own side hustle, start your own business, do all these things. And that's great. And I am all for that. It's a big thing that I preach. But at the same time, I came from the corporate world. And guess what? Not everybody should be an entrepreneur. They just shouldn't. And some people should be an entrepreneur, but they should also be in corporate sometimes. So I wanted to pick Will's brain because he has always done a much better job than even I did in the corporate world. I was a bit of a square trying to get stuck in a circle sometimes. But Will did a much better job rising through the ranks than I did. And I wanted to have him on because for all the people who are working that 8 to 5, that 9 to 5, I want to make sure that people understand what best practices are to grow with companies, whether that's the same company or different companies is different. It doesn't really matter, but the best practices are the same. So Will, talk to me a little bit about your corporate journey. Give me the highlights. We started together. We worked together at Gartner, start off, give me a little bit of the highlights of your career since Gartner and then to where you are now.
Yeah. So like Steven said, worked 7 years at Gartner as an account executive, rising through the ranks from like small business, mid-size, all the way up to global enterprise. And then
real quick for the many people who don't know, what did Gartner do?
Oh, Gartner's IT research and advisory firm.
Yep,
one of the largest.
A lot of consulting for big companies.
Yep. They do any company that's buying tech usually is looking at Gartner to make sure that they're making an unbiased decision.
Yep.
But yeah, like I said, went into large enterprise, working with some of the largest companies here in Atlanta, and then pivoted and wanted to do K through 12, do something educational so I could get into leadership, right? Wanted to make my mark in an area that was struggling. So I had opportunity to do that. From there, I took it to Salesforce as an account executive in their mid-commercial space, and now I sit as a regional vice president for our financial services team.
That's great. So when you were at Gartner, you, if I remember correctly, you did get promoted from like a regular AE to like a senior AE.
Yeah.
You were doing a lot of stuff there. So when we were doing that, they didn't even have a senior AE position at the time, right?
No,
Like they actually ended up creating that for people like you and me. Talk to me about two things. I think a lot of people, they get stuck kind of in their position and maybe they don't see a roadmap up. I think one of the great things you did was that you took a lot of initiative within the company, right? You started the internship program, for instance. You know, that was something that was really big. I mean, this was a big company. We didn't have an internship program. We'll help spearhead that. And, you know, so talk to me about some of the things when it came to creating initiative, taking charge when you weren't in a leadership position. What's that like? Because I think that's a super underrated thing for people who are trying to move up in an organization, and you know, some best practices there.
Yeah, I'll take it back even further for when I started at the company, right? I've always been the person to try to pull people out of their comfort zone. I'm a shy guy, so I have to literally pull myself out of comfort zone. You might not know this, but I'm very shy. I have to pull myself out of the comfort zone. And I decided, I was like, you know, I'm coming into this new place. I literally got the job 4 days before I showed up in Fort Myers. I don't even know if you know that, but I got the job in 4 days. And they said, hey, can you come down in 4 days? I'm like, yeah, sure.
That was after you blew. That was after you blew your third and final interview, and they asked me if they should give you one more shot at it because they thought you were nervous.
No, that was after training. That was after training. I did not take it seriously. I didn't take training seriously. I'm not gonna lie about that. So, but yeah, I've always wanted to pull people out of their comfort zone. So I started, you know, building a community or friendships and networking through something that I did extracurricular, was basketball. And that's how basically I saw you. I was like, man, who's this bald and white dude over here doing these long floaters on this hot asphalt? And
teardrops, baby.
I had no idea.
Staying in the hot sun in Fort Myers in August, man, nothing will get you in shape faster than that.
So hot, so hot. And then, so I see you out there. I'm like, man, who is this guy? And then the next day, he's in there giving us a training on Gartner for tech professionals. I'm like,
I had been working at the company about a year and a half longer than Will, and at that point, I was pretty much tenured. So
right. So I started there, just building the network, building the name, building the brand for myself, which is something you have to do in order to rise through the ranks, where people can, like, if something opens up, they're like, oh, let me think of Will, or let me think of this person, because your brand is already so bright. I also started collecting money with the American Heart Association, which was a nonprofit that Gartner did support. So I started walking around, I think it was like every Friday, and just getting people's change, like pennies, quarters. Some people would put dollars in there, $20 bills. And I would literally spend my Saturday mornings going to the bank, dumping it out, putting the things in the little coin slots, because they wouldn't, you know, it wasn't like you just take it to Kroger and you dump it in.
Right. Yeah, I remember that.
Right. They take 15%. I was like, nah, let me take it to the bank. So I took it to the bank, was stuffing them in there for hours in the morning. And we raised, maybe doing that over maybe a year, I think we raised like $5,000 or $6,000 of me just collecting people's change. And then Gartner matched it. So I got my brand out there because I was going from tech, finance, collections, services, sales, marketing, all the executives knocking on their doors, the chief controlling officer to our GVP. So I really got a chance to put my name out there. And then participated and helped setting up the golf tournaments. I didn't play golf at the time. And then setting up the culture committee to make sure that we're getting everybody in the building into one place, where I think our first event was like Oktoberfest or something like that, where we did like the Halloween trunk or treats and stuff.
Yeah, that's right.
Putting in work and, you know, investing in the company where I was at, where I saw myself long term, and hoping that it would, you know, pay dividends going forward. And it did. And it did in its own way, somewhat.
So one of the things I talk about all the time is 4TO, which stands for the 4 types of wealth. And everything you're talking about, it falls under social wealth. A lot of times when people think social wealth, they're just thinking about like friends and family, things like that. But I always let people know, it's like, you've ever heard the saying that your network is your net worth? Like, all you did, you weren't in a leadership position yet. You were doing really good at your job. You weren't no slouch or anything like that. But at the same time, it's like you found a way to expand your social network by taking the initiative and doing all of these different things for really good causes at the time. So it's like they weren't even company specific things. So for the people sitting there going, listen, my company's a finely tuned machine. I don't see any gaps where I could help fill it in. That's fine. Do something extracurricular of the company, offer to organize something like what Will did. And like he said, he was networking with people that I was working there longer than him. I don't even think I met some of those people. So, but it opened doors because he was going around doing the change thing and all that. So, I mean, that is just such a great, on top of the fact that, you just have a good heart. You're out there trying to help people. I know you weren't doing this, for the sake of, I'm trying to knock on more people's doors, but it's like, that's just a byproduct of what happens with something like that. So it's a fantastic example. I think it's super underrated.
Appreciate it, man. Yeah, taking initiative does make things easier in your corporate career, especially if you're not performing as well. People want to offer more help.
It's a very good point. So talk to me about, what is it like to lead when you are not a leader? Because this is something I know you and I have worked on a lot. We've been on the same team for years. We've been at the same company for years and different things. And that's something that you and I are strong believers in, is that you don't have to be in management to be a leader. And guess what? Just because you have somebody who is in management, it doesn't mean that person's a leader. So it's this misconception, I think, that holds a lot of people back from doing things that they could be doing better or doing. So talk to me a little bit about what it's like, because I think that's another thing that really set your brand apart internally, pretty much anywhere you worked, is you were always a great leader, even when you weren't in a leadership position.
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to just really identifying where the gaps are across the board, and where you need support. And
how do you identify those? How do you go about identifying gaps?
I think it's easy in our role because KPIs is our biggest measure. Pipeline, number of dials, ACV or NICV, as well as just your overall performance as a account executive and person in sales. Right, you can identify gaps easily just by following the numbers. But also, if you're listening on a friend's call, you're like, hey, man, you're struggling here. Hey, I would have said this, I would have did that, versus looking at your leader to address those challenges for your mates. You step in and do it. Or if hey, I'm having success doing this, hey, everybody give this a try. Or, hey, here's how I was successful. Make it your own, right? But here's what I did well, and I'll leave room for them to kind of build in their own personality and their own kind of mentality around how they approach a certain situation. But again, it's just around identifying gaps and taking the initiative, not waiting on leaders to be leaders, right? Because sometimes if you wait for that, that's never going to happen. I think you and I experienced that a number of different times. And I think it prepared me for this role as, that's what I have to do. I have to identify gaps in things that are systematic that I can put resources and tools around to multiply my talent, multiply the things that I've seen done well across the industry, and bring it into one group where my 8 direct reports can take that and multiply it across their businesses as well. So I think it's just really about taking initiative, identifying the right gaps, and having a plan.
I know another thing that you and I both did, and this is one I would recommend to people, is it's something I call managing your manager. So, I've had great managers. I've had managers that were so bad they were literally falling asleep at their desk because they were on drugs. So I've been through all of them. Okay. And no matter how good or how bad they were, well, definitely if they were that bad, there was a lot of gaps. But even for the really good ones, even for some of my favorite managers that I had, they're still people and they are imperfect beings. So even though maybe I had one manager that was great at coaching and she was super organized, she may have not been, the best with internal follow-up or something like that. So one thing that you and I talked a lot about is when it comes to managing your manager, one of the ways to identify those gaps is to, number one, you can just take notice of things that they may be weak in. But the other thing you can do is you can ask them and say, hey, is there something I can help you take off your plate? Like managers, a lot of times, dude, especially the bigger companies that you get in, they get swallowed up in these pointless meetings, or they're helping out with recruiting for people that they aren't even recruiting. Like they get their calendars get swallowed up because a lot of times corporations get really inefficient with the way that they manage their time. And that's not necessarily their fault. So if you take the initiative to go to your manager and say, hey, what's something I can take off your plate? Do you want me to do that template, put together the template for the weekly meeting? Okay, if that'll help you, I'll be happy to do that. You do that, man, you will jump light years ahead of a lot of people, because, and I think this is a misconception, especially, you don't have to be the best performer to get promoted in an organization. A lot of times the best performers don't. A lot of times the best performers, they want to stay in their position, especially in sales. Like you and I did this for a long time. We were top performers, but we didn't want to take on the load of management because we made more than our managers and we did less work. So
turned it down 3 times at Gartner.
We all did. So it was just like, why would I make less money probably to do more work? And look, there's definitely some of them can make more and they're stable income and all that. But I knew people, I'm gonna give a shout out here to Kat Riley. And Kat, I am so sorry if I'm misrepresenting your career on this, but I think I remember it well. I believe Kat had only, at the time when she was working with Gartner, I think she had only made it to 1 winner circle. And normally in management, they wanted to see at least 2. But I think the reason that they made the exception for her was they just saw that here's a woman who is just ready to manage people. Like, we don't need her to have another individual successful year. Maybe, the year she didn't make it, it wasn't her fault or whatever. They looked at the context and they just said, hey, she wasn't the top performer. She wasn't she was very good, but she wasn't number 1 in the stack rankings.
Right.
But when it came to the role she was going into, she had the emotional intelligence. She had the organizational skills. She was great at listening and coaching. She had all the other things that matched up for the role. So they gave it to her and they said that. And she was, to this day, a good friend and one of my favorite managers that I had. So I think that that's a common misnomer there. So, I think managing your manager, like we said, that's another way that's great to get ahead. This is awesome, man. Give me one more for somebody who's working that 9 to 5, trying to grow up the corporate ladder. What's one more tip that you could give when you say, hey, this is how you get noticed. This is how you build your personal brand. What were other things that you would do to kind of get that out there outside of being good at your job?
Yeah, direct networking, right? I think direct networking is the best way to really understand and get to know the roles that you're looking for ahead, right? Getting mentorship, not only up, but of course, with individuals that are like on your same level playing field. Like having folks like yourself when I first got to Gartner, right? Understanding like, hey, what does good look like? What are some of the tips and tricks? Like, I think a lot of stuff that you did probably got me in a lot of trouble. But it worked out successful, right? But also having leaders want to be able to pour into you. So I think the networking piece of it is imperative. So the happy hours do matter, right? The lunches do matter. Those early breakfasts or the coffee chats, they do matter. Whether that's once or twice a month, it doesn't have to be anything egregious like every week. But just putting yourself in front of those people so when roles open up, they're like, hey, I know somebody. I think he'd be a good fit for that role, and he's looking to get into leadership. And that's what happened at Salesforce.
I totally agree with all of that. Being there and putting yourself in front of people, the direct networking. Didn't you even go to some of the leadership, like not even your immediate manager, but didn't you have meetings with one step above you as well? And, let everybody know like, hey, this is what I'm interested in. But didn't you do that as well and kind of talk about what the expectations for the role are?
I did that early at Salesforce, like being a rookie, being the new guy, right? You have the, I don't really
you let them know. You put them on notice. This is where I want to go. Okay.
Exactly. And then like, you don't have the wherewithal to know really, hey, this person is in this position and this is how much power they really have. I didn't know any of that. So I'm meeting with EVPs going to their house for breakfast and all that good stuff, and having detailed conversations about where I want my career to go and how he's willing to invest in me. I didn't really know how high he was until it came time for me to look at promotions. And he was like, hey, where do you need my help? And I'm like, hey, I got this role here that I'm interested in. He was like, got it. I'll be a recommendation for you. I'm like, cool. You know, didn't ask for it. He reached out to me because he knows that that's my desire. He wants to help. But building those relationships early and just playing the, you know, hey, I'm the new kid role.
And one thing, so there is a guy that lives in Gainesville. His name is John Spence. He's like a top 50 business speaker around the world. The guy used to run the Rockefeller Center, just multiple New York Times bestsellers. Like he's just a legend when it comes to the, you know, leadership, management, different things like that. I was fortunate enough to have lunch with him actually twice. And one time I was asking him about a couple things, and he said, we were coming to the end of our meeting, and he said, I will give you the answer to those on our next lunch, but you have to do these things first, and I bet you won't. I said, why do you think I won't? Again, this guy, multiple books, like I'm getting lunch with him. His time is probably worth like $1,000 an hour, if not more. You know, like he does speaking engagements for 50K plus, like he's huge. And he goes, I bet you won't do this. And naturally me, I'm like, I'll bring it, dude. Like I live to prove people wrong. and this is what he said. He said, those 3 things I just asked you to do. He goes, I want you to follow up with me in a month and let me know how it went. And I said, that's it? He goes, yeah. He goes, I've probably done this with 30 people. He's like, nobody's ever done it before.
You can't challenge.
You'll forget. That was it. He challenged me, and all he was asking for, and he said he'd give me another luncheon if I did it, was I had to follow up with him in a month with the results of how it went. And he said that a lot of people out there and I love this term, a lot of people out there will go, they'll have the initial conversations, they'll get the information they need, and then they don't do anything with it, or they don't report back on what the results are. And he calls those people assholes. So the reason I say that is because I know for a fact that you do this really well. You do follow up really well. So, and I think that is a lost science in part of the mathematics to building deep relationships, because these people will probably forget, you know, at some point. They may remember a little bit, but they'll probably forget about your meeting too at some point if you don't follow up. What do you do to make sure that you follow up properly on things like that? Like, you're at the beginning of your career at Salesforce. You got 18 to 24 months minimum before you can even apply for a promotion. So it's very easy to forget with how busy you get and all these other things, how, you know, to follow up with that VP you were talking to or whatever the case was. So how do you keep track of that? Like what steps do you do to make sure you're following up? Because I think it separates people light years is when you follow up and continue to show initiative more than just once. Oh, I lost your audio. You froze. Will, you froze. I don't have any audio. I can't hear anything. This down 20.
Yeah. Yep.
Oh, there you go. Now you're back. Oh, now you're gone again. Damn it. What is going on? Can you hear me? Raise your hand if you can hear me. You can hear me? Okay. That is strange. You're looking pretty glitchy too.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's being intentional. Like, I wouldn't reach out to meet with somebody just because, right?
Dude, this is so weird.
So I think if you're intentional and you
I'm
have
hearing your answer from like a minute ago.
Am I frozen?
Dude, this is funny. You just asked me, am I frozen?
Yep. No audio.
Is this the broadcast? Is it your internet?
I see you moving. I'm not moving.
Exit out and come back in.
Can you hear me now?
Here, dude, that is weird. Fine on my side.
All right, I'm back. Can you hear me?
Okay. Whatever. Yeah, maybe connection got bad or something.
Yeah, I'm not sure, man. It was lagging for a little while there when you were going through the when you were talking about managing your manager. It was lagging for a little bit.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
I think it must be the internet on your side because it's crystal clear over here.
Yeah, it was crystal clear on my side too.
Oh, really? That's so strange.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Let's go back to because I'm pretty sure the audio on my end was good. We'll find out the hard way here in a little bit, but I'll edit all this out, so it's not a big deal. Crap. What was the question I had just asked you before I noticed your audio was jacked?
How do we follow up? The follow up.
Oh, the follow up. There you go. So just
yeah, I can start with intentionality.
Yeah, so just go ahead and just start with how you do it, and give me something functional, like if you calendarized it or whatever the case was.
All right.
All right. Ready? Pause for a second so I'll know where to start. Give me start at 27:05.
No, that's a great question, Courson. So I always lead with intentionality, right? So I really wouldn't introduce myself or try to network with somebody if I didn't have a reason or a plan of how I plan to leverage that person. That's what networking is. So of course I would have a plan in place. It was like, hey, here's a lunch. I would love to sync and on calendars to talk strategy, but I would also want to meet with your team, right? Having those plans in place, those are my asks, leaving out of it. And if they have asks as well, naturally in sales, our follow up is the bread and butter of how we win deals and how we differentiate ourselves. So ensuring that I have a tight recap of, hey, here's what you said you're going to do, here's what I'm going to do, and here are our next steps. And then actually just sending out the calendar invites ahead of time, right? Having it already on the calendar for us to keep in place. So if things like life happens, right, and being able to follow up the day before saying, hey, just like we did for the podcast, like, hey, you're still good for 7:30 or 8:30 tomorrow. Let me know if anything changes, we can move it, right? And being intentional that way, because leaders, people in roles like myself,
and that's all you'll say. Like, you don't do this huge, massive email. It's just something quick and simple like that, right?
Yeah, thank you for your time. Here's what we talked about. Here are our next steps. I'll put these bad boys on your calendar. And I look forward to talking to you soon.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you're listening to the podcast, if you're watching this on YouTube, go back, rewind that, and write all that down. That is the perfect template. Does not need to be significant, okay? It should take you, a minute to write that? Yeah. I mean, just, hey, thanks so much. Here's 3-4 things that we talked about that we're going to do. Follow up on this date. Boom, done. Nice and simple. Don't overthink it.
Yeah, treat it like it's your business, but act like it's your family. That's how you network.
That's a good one. I like that. Treat it like it's your business, but act like it's your family. Family that you like anyway. So, so, let me ask you this before I want to talk a little bit about how some of this, because you had a very interesting upbringing.
Yeah.
But I want to ask you about this because this is something that I am definitely not an authority figure on. And that would be dressing well in the office. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I will, me, I give credit where credit is due. Okay. And credit to Mr. Will Watkins for upping my game in the clothing department. Okay. Because it took some time. And I was a square peg they were trying to put in a circular hole. And I was just like, man, I just want to be comfortable. like all this other stuff. And at the time, I had grown up poor, and I did not have nice clothes, like for the most part of my life growing up. We just
were poor, man. You just lower middle class.
we were lower middle. Let's put it this way: when it came to the Abercrombie, Hollister, and what was the other one? Aeropostale. Yeah, when it was back for those 90s teenagers years and all that, I was barely able to afford Hollister. Like, could not afford Abercrombie. So wherever that puts me, but. What would you say about that? Because there's a lot of people nowadays. I mean, you're seeing it with like Goldman Sachs, for instance, always suit and tie. They just said, hey, we will do casual Fridays, which just means you still got to wear a suit, but you don't have to wear a tie. Yep. Just all these different things. People are becoming tech companies. We see this all the time. They're like, whatever. We got a whole bunch of, like computer people. They're not in front of anybody. Wear your, Nirvana t-shirt, whatever you want to do.
I have this hat on all day.
So. Hey, there you have this hat on all day, right? So what would you say when the climate around dressing well is changing, the expectations that we're having are changing? I obviously am for the fact that, hey, dressing casually is great, but I don't care what anybody says. If I get on, and this is true, I've started doing this recently, and I have done videos giving financial advice in a tank top because I was like, oh man, I got to stick with the content schedule. I got to post something real quick. I'm just wearing a tank top, whatever. And hey, I'm from Florida. It's considered, nice dress wear. So, I'll get on and do that. And I will literally get comments that say, I'm not taking financial advice from a guy in a tank top. Like what? Like, what about the fact that I'm a millionaire? Do you care about that? So it's funny how there is still something to be said about how we expect people to dress. I wear a collared shirt like this. I talk about money. Videos outperform anything else that I'm doing in either like a t-shirt or a tank top. Seeing a direct correlation there. So there is still something to be said, despite society trying to get what we want, about dressing for the part that you want, right? What is it? Dress for the position that you want to have. What would you say about that in this current environment?
I would say your brand is everything. Part of how you dress, how you speak, where you interact, how you interact with people, how you treat people. That's all your brand. First impressions are everything, right? If you're a leader, right, your team is going to follow suit, right? So whatever you want to convey for your team, if that's comfortability, if that's corporate straightness, if that's just being clean cut. That's what you will convey to your team, and that's the brand that you'll set. I do a mix, right? On Wednesdays, I wear a blazer and dress shirt and stuff. When I'm virtual, I wear casual. I'm still a collared shirt. I wear a t-shirt on Friday, right? And that's the brand in which my team kind of follows suits. But in today's environment, as long as you're not wrinkled, as long as you don't have stains on your shirt, as long as it's clean, and it's professional now is just being clean, right? You don't always have to wear the suit and tie at all, especially when you're working in tech or outside of tech. It's starting to kind of democratize. But when you're interviewing, even if it's virtually, please wear a suit, tie, and shirt. Those are still major. Okay. Those are still major do's and don'ts.
What if it's a job to where that like you've been in the building before and you're like, well, everybody just dresses casual there. Should you still wear a suit or, professional jacket or whatever the case is?
The number one rule is ask the recruiter.
Okay. I like that.
The recruiter will tell you whether, hey, yes, still wear a suit and tie. Like Salesforce, you come in, you'll see people in shorts and tank tops, right? And ball caps or cowboy hats. But you come into an interview, they may be in their short t-shirt, but you better have on your suit with a tie, right? That's what our recruiter is going to tell you to do, because it's still a professional organization and we have to treat it as such.
Yeah, and there's still going to be times where you are going to have to dress very professionally in front of clients too. So do you have the capacity?
Yeah, and it takes effort. Like even if you're dressing down, it takes effort. I got on you all the time about not putting enough effort into how you look.
Amen. You did. And look, you changed my perspective on it a lot because, I'm a guy that likes to march to the beat of his own drum. I could afford to because I was always one of the top performers. So it wasn't like I was ever if anything, I made a career off of figuring out what are the stupid corporate things that they're asking me to do that aren't helping me generate revenue that I can just completely cut out. I might get a slap on the hand for it, but you know what? At the end of the day, it's worth it because it's going to enable me to like prospect more or whatever the case is. Like I that's what I made my career on, was building out efficiencies and knocking out inefficiencies in the corporate world. The problem with that was that people knew I didn't like to play the game, and I wasn't trying to get into management. So again, I wasn't worried about it. But when I started thinking about it, when I knew you started to look at it, there was a clear, noticeable difference in the reception of how that was because of my personal brand. It was a little rebellious. It was, hyper efficient, top performer. He's a dog. Just let him off a leash and get out of his way. That was my corporate personal brand for the most part. And again, nothing necessarily wrong with that, but does that serve me with where I'm trying to go? Well, at the time it didn't matter, but if I wanted to if I was an AVP and I was looking at you or me, and we're both going for the same position, I'm going to go and look at it and say, here's two top performers. Okay, maybe Steven was doing a little bit, better on certain years than Will, but Will still was excellent. Sorry, I had to get that dig in. Outperform my man, but no, but not by much. Will was amazing. So it's like, if I'm looking at this and I'm making this decision on who I want to hire for the next management position, I'm going to go, well, Will's always little bit better dressed. He gives that perception of a little bit more put together, but a little more professional. He's doing a lot more, side work, I guess you could say, within the organization. Steven's, he'll help out with mentors, but he doesn't really branch out beyond that. Will shows a level of organization that's slightly better than Steven's. I'm going to go with him. Like, that's it. Like, your personal brand would win out the performance if I had to pick between the two of us. So, I totally agree with you on all of
that. And it's all about multiplying your skill too, right? Not everybody can do what you do to get deals closed. You know what I'm saying? Like, I took the pieces of you that, when you were mentoring me at Gartner, that I was like, I could do this great too. I can't do that. I'm not going to do that. That's not going to work for me. It's not going to be natural. So I made it my, but I knew the thought process behind, all right, here's how you build relationships. Here's how you attack deals. Here's how you negotiate. I can't negotiate. I can't build relationships that way, but I know that's the skill that it takes to be good or to be great. So I took it and made it my own. I took those pieces, that core, and made it my own, right? Put my own personality in. That's what I teach today, is like putting those frameworks in place for people to be able to say, hey, here's what you need to do. But you can make it your own. Here's the framework. And I think that's the differentiation of like understanding that there's a framework versus saying, I don't know if there's a framework, but this works for me, right? And being able to structure and put that in place. I think that's a little bit of a differentiator. And as well as, it's hard to beat somebody who has a unicorn as a client.
Yeah, no, it's true. Hey, and look, it goes both ways, because I definitely up my garb game, right? As of you. Now, I also looked at you and said, listen, this man's pulling off like 3-piece suits, ascots, and all this other BS. Like, forget that.
I wore an ascot.
Okay. Maybe not an ascot. I think you wore an ascot one time. I don't think you're a fan, but I think you
Christmas
did.
Party.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's right. So, but the point is, the 3-piece suits, all that, like, you got the tie buttoned up, and I'm like, man, that just feels like a leash. I got to be able to breathe.
Yes.
But I would rock the sports coat. I would do the button down thing. And it's like it elevated my game. So the exact same thing with you. I was like, dressing like the way Will does, I'm going to feel fake. I'm going to feel uncomfortable. I'm not going to be able to do that.
Yeah.
But can I do a little bit better than a brown shirt with black pants? Like, come on, man. You can at least try to match something. Like, I really just did not care. So I think that's an important lesson, is that just look for people who do something well, learn what you can from them, and adapt what you can make work for you. Don't try to be that person, but try to pick up on best practices they can do. Because like Will said, he's very much an introvert sometimes. I'm very extroverted. Things I was doing in business were not things that were going to work from him, but it didn't mean he couldn't learn from me. And the reverse is true. Yep. So that's some golden stuff right there, my friend. Talk to me a little bit about, growing up. you know, I know you're somebody who's been very financially conscious growing
Yeah.
up, and that has played a lot in your professional career. You've always, you know, been looking for, and one thing I want to ask you about after we talk about this is I want to talk to you about how you kind of would negotiate salaries too, because I think that's something that's super important that people don't understand. But growing up, talk to me a little bit about your upbringing with your parents. Did you, you know, were you well off? Were you
Yeah.
poor as dirt? You know, what did your parents do, and was money ever talked about inside the house?
Yeah, man, that's a good segue. So I grew with both my parents in the household. Both my parents are from Tennessee, Columbia, Tennessee, a very country rural area. So my parents didn't necessarily, I wouldn't say they grew up poor, but they grew up basically check to check. They were happy kids, you know, they understood money was important, and money wasn't easy to come by. So they always knew that as a respect to their parents and how hard they work, because they work multiple jobs every week just to make ends meet and to have a little extra. I think from my parents' perspective, they were raised to go to college, right? And from there, they're raised to get a job. And when they raised us to do the same thing: go to college, get a job.
Yep.
That's it. That's the plan. That's what you're going to do. I didn't know growing up how much money, how little, how much, how excessive we had. I had no idea. My parents, I just knew if I asked for something, I had to work for it. Right? They
I
would
like that.
never, ever give me anything. Hey, I want the new Transformer that just came out. All right, cool. You got to do this, and this. I'm like,
I need that
all
new
right,
Optimus
cool. I'm
Prime,
going to do it.
man.
Right? I've always had to work for whatever I earned. So I've
Okay.
always had to eat what I kill. And I
Did you
appreciate
get an allowance? This is always a big sticking point for a lot of people when we talk about allowance. Did you get one?
yeah.
Okay. Like,
I got a
was it conditional or unconditional? Like, hey, you get 20 bucks a
oh no,
week
it was
no matter
conditional.
what, or was it you get it if you do certain things?
100% conditional. Keeping my room clean, taking the trash down on time. Dude, I was cutting the grass at 9 years old.
I got you beat. I was at 7.
My dad traveled from Sunday night to Friday night. Like, and I was basically the man of the house for that whole time, making
Dude,
sure the
child labor is the way to go, man. That's why we both have 3 kids. So
yeah,
we know it.
3 kids, good gracious. Let's not get on that topic. But yeah, I never knew how much money my parents had, and if they were struggling, I never knew, right?
Okay.
And I just knew my dad's career was continuing to rise. I never saw them buy more than what they would typically buy year over year, and I think that's why they're so financially stable now. They've paid off their house. My dad's looking at getting an RV. Like they've done well for themselves. Like he pays for vacations now and all that good stuff. So I do have that luxury.
Guys kick ass and take names. Like, come on. Like,
Yeah.
let's not change pops here, okay?
Yeah, my dad's done a great job. And my mom ended up being a stay-at-home
And your
mom.
dad, he grew up, or not grew up, but he grew through the ranks corporate too,
Oh
right? So
yeah. From Ernst
all
and Young, Cap Gemini, Deloitte. He's now a senior partner. I don't know what his role is. I really don't know. It's like the CIA. He's at Microsoft now, leading a global organization. I think his biggest client is Coca-Cola. I'm not sure.
Okay.
So that's what he does. But yeah, growing up, it was all about family. We didn't really talk about money outside of live below your means. However much you make, live on 50% of it or less if you can. So that's how I've kind of measured my life. You know, we hide and tuck money away because I think my wife and I, we can get irresponsible with money. We get happy feet if a big commission check come in, like, what are we gonna
Yeah,
do?
you guys do, but you could also afford probably 3 times the house that you have right now. So
Oh yeah. We
cut
man,
yourself a little bit of slack on that.
yeah. We definitely went way under our budget in regards to the house that we built. So we built this house and was still to be able to be under budget. So I'm trying to be disciplined, man. She wants a new house soon, and I'm just like, all right, 5 more years in this one, and we'll buy it cash. You know, 5 more years we'll buy it cash.
So what was something? So you're growing up, learning all these things, live before your means, but then God gives you with these big ass thighs, and you can run like nobody's business, right? And you know you go to college on a baseball scholarship. Talk to me a little bit about that. and then getting drafted. What was that like?
Yeah, man. I mean, it was a unique experience, man. It's one of those things you don't expect. One of those things you just kind of work for, especially coming from a D2 school, and not the most competitive conference. I didn't think I had a shot, right? So when I got the opportunity to go play, I took full advantage of it. The unfortunate part is I got hurt every year that I was playing. So I never really got a chance to play like I wanted to play, but I did have the opportunity. I did have the exposure. And I felt like I was really good enough, right? To be there. My dad gave me the greatest advice. He was like, son, at the end of the day, when this ends, you got to use your degree. So I graduated from Clark Atlanta University and a degree in marketing and finance. Had an opportunity even after my first year where I did well, but still got injured. I had an opportunity to go work with AT&T. I started at business development leadership program, which helped kick off my career outside of baseball. So when I went to interview from Gartner, I used that experience to talk about what I've learned, what sales development skills that I already had to come in there and land that job and move down there in 4 days, knowing that I was supposed to go to spring training. I skipped it because I was making so much money.
Well, so hold on. You skipped something that I get to cheat here because I know you so well. So before that, where'd you get drafted? Who'd you get drafted to? And if you don't mind, what was that signing bonus? Because I want to highlight something you did with it that I know about.
So I didn't get drafted high, but I got drafted by the Yankees. I got 75 grand and I went and bought me a condo.
Yep. Yeah, you bought something else too, but the condo was the smart move.
I'm gonna talk about that other one, man. That was a bad investment.
Yeah, we'll leave that one out. But it doesn't matter. The point is, you bought that, so you got 75 grand, biggest check you've ever seen in your life at that point, right?
Absolutely.
You go, you take that money, you buy a condo. You didn't just buy a condo, you bought it in a really smart area, right?
I mean, yeah.
So, like, where did that influence? Talk to me a little bit about that. That was your first like investment, basically.
Yeah. Didn't really recognize the value behind it in hindsight. But when I did, man, it was like, all right, cool. I didn't get a chance to really live in it more than 3 months.
I know. Yeah, you moved and then you had to rent it out.
Yeah, rented it out for, whoa, man, 5 years or so. I can't remember. It was a long time. But I rented it out for a long time and then was able to sell it and made 2x.
There you go. So it was a happy accident, but at the same time, it's like this is something we just don't talk about enough. 75 grand, like, yeah, that's a lot of money. Don't get me wrong, but it's not $1 million either.
Yeah, it's not. Yeah.
What I think the mistake that a lot of people make, though, is that they don't realize that buying assets, especially in the world we live in nowadays, where nobody really owns anything. You live in a big city, you don't have to own a car. You can just taxi or Uber, public transit, whatever the case is. A lot of people don't own homes. They just rent. You don't even own the music anymore. Most people don't even buy their own music. You are renting your music off of Spotify. Well, if Spotify ever shuts down, guess what? You don't own any of that music on your playlist. Nope. So we are in a world now to where companies own assets and people borrow from them. And I think that is in direct contrast to what the wealthy do. Because if you don't own anything, then and you're seeing this with athletes. Jay-Z just came out, or I'm sorry, not Jay-Z. Kanye just came out the other day and said, hey, I'm going to stop doing my deals with Adidas and I'm going to go in on my own. And he's got to work out all the legal stuff with it. But he's recognizing what a lot of other people have recognized is that I want equity. I want ownership of stuff. And that's what you did at a young age. You took advantage of some money you had. And even if you weren't completely conscious of this, you flipped a huge investment just a few years later. So how has owning, talk to me a little about your mindset as you went MLB, got hurt. Now you're back in the corporate space. Ever since then, when it comes to money, what's your mindset around owning things versus, renting or leasing essentially?
Man, honestly, ownership is the only way to build wealth. Right?
I agree.
Owning your own business like you're doing, owning your own car, like even if your car's only worth $13,000, that's $13,000 in profit in your pocket, right? Yep. You're not paying nobody on that, right? You're owning your house to a certain extent, right? Or owning multiple properties. I think it's imperative. It's the only path to wealth. I don't do enough of it. If I'm being honest, I don't do enough of it. Like I miss all of my opportunities to really like buy 50 houses in the city of Atlanta back in 2008 and back in 2020.
Big recessions. Yep. Things got cheap. And then they got expensive, but they were cheap then.
Yeah, they had a good 2-month window where you could have bought everything.
That's right. But that's true. You've missed that. But I think you've also, talk to me a little bit about what you're doing with your group, because even though you're working your 9 to 5, I think it's fascinating that you have a lot of extracurricular things that are going on, as well. And you've recognized, hey, I can have, equity in other things. And it doesn't necessarily have to be me. I can do it through partnership. So talk to me a little bit about that, because I think that's an opportunity for a lot of people with 9 to 5s, to where it's like, you don't necessarily have to have a side hustle to have, a side hustle. Basically.
Yeah. So I partnered with a couple of friends of mine here in Atlanta, just locally, in regards to just kind of finding ways to make our money work for us. So we wrote children books. So Left to Right, Making Good Decisions.
Great book.
Got more books that we're going to be writing, that we're going to be publishing in 2023. But we also went in on like some commercial real estate ventures. And those will be paying dividends here next year. And
fantastic.
I mean, I think it was a risky move because we all had the money, but really didn't want to spend it. But put it out there, right? And I think those dividends will come in about 3x at the end of it. But we're also looking at buying Airbnbs and all that good stuff now, because even though the market's high, a lot of folks are still traveling, and Airbnb is number 2 outside of picking a hotel.
It's true. And geographically, us in the South are experiencing a very different real estate market than people that are in like a California and New York. Just, a lot of it has to do, was driven by the COVID policies, the way they shut down businesses, being business friendly. And, so our real estate markets are not the same. So it's a fascinating move, like you said, and making your money work for you. So, and I understand that, in doing so, obviously, if you're going to have a partnership with people, you have to do it with people that you trust. So how did you kind of, I have plenty of friends that I would never trust my money with.
It's golf. Like during the pandemic, we golfed so often, we learned so much about each other that we just built a stronger like friendship and turned into a partnership.
That's great.
I mean, that's exactly how we did it.
Again, to use your word that you kept saying all throughout this thing, intentionality.
Yep.
Started off as golf, and then it was like, you know what? Let's like talk serious about this stuff. And then beyond the intentionality, you did something where a lot of people stopped and you took action. Like that's something I think that is, I talk to people all the, like my motto, kind of for what I do is be your own hero. Well, guess what? We call them action heroes for a reason. But there's no hero that just sat around on his ass and didn't do a whole bunch of something, or there's no heroines that sat around and just twiddled their hair and, wish that things would happen and then it worked out. It's like, no. They're action heroes because they take action.
Took action.
So I love that, man. I know we got a couple minutes left here, and, what is, do you have any recommendations for people? The thing that strikes me, again, I get to cheat on this interview a whole bunch because you're one of my closest friends. I know you extremely well. But you don't just do these things because you have this big grand master plan, right? If anything, that's probably your weakness, is probably the long-term planning, right? You and I talk about this all the time. But the reason it doesn't matter so much, you still need it. The reason I would argue it doesn't matter so much is because you have the habits. You have built the disciplines. And go ahead and plug it. I know he loves it. Right here, Atomic Habits, James Clear. I think I just plugged that in my newsletter. Ladies and gentlemen, for those of you that don't know, go to stephencourson.me. You can check it out. I think this month I'm actually recommending that as book of the month. It's fantastic.
Fantastic book.
But you are somebody who, people always, and you've experienced this before, to where I've been around and I've just called things about certain people in their life. And you're like, how did you know that? Right. Because I have studied psychology, behaviorism. And the reality is we are made up of the little things that we do. So if you understand the little things that a person does in their life, you understand the inputs that they're doing, you can make a pretty safe guess about what the output's going to be.
Absolutely.
Okay? If you sit around and watch 5 hours of Netflix every day and, scroll through TikTok and all that other stuff and don't do push-ups, I can tell you what you're going to look like in 2 years if nothing changes. Okay. So what you can't manifest abs, ladies and gentlemen. Sorry.
You've tried.
I've tried. Jeez. So so end it with this. Tell me a little bit about because this I think is super important when it comes to building wealth of any kind, whether it's health wealth, social wealth, financial wealth, time wealth, being a person who has good habits. What are some of the things, some parting wisdom that you would give to people on, hey, here's 1 or 2 things I would do if you want to build up good habits?
First, if it doesn't challenge you, it will not change you, right? Ooh. In order to build good habits, you have to truly challenge your mindset. You have to truly challenge your body, right? To do things that you may not even be expecting it to do, right? The mind is probably the hardest thing to control. Second is the body, right? So you got to get control over your mind, giving yourself affirmations of, hey, I'm able to do this because of this. I'm doing this because of that. Like we hire people because of their intentionality and their motivation. So you have to be motivated by something, whether that's family, money, whatever it is. You got to have a key motivation, but you also have to be intentional about going after those things. From there, you can build habits of what you need to do every day to get to that point, to get 1% better, 2% better. What do I need to do to get there? And you build your habits around the actual goal. Like my goal this month is to not drink for the entire year, challenging, and ride my Peloton at least 3 times a week and do my abs. I haven't worked out in 5 years, but I still look good. But those are things that I'm doing intentional because all my other habits are already built up, right? Those are things like some habits become life, right?
Yeah.
Right? You don't want your bad habits to become your life.
66 days for those of you out there. A lot of BS going around about, oh, do something for 21 days, 3 weeks, and it'll become automatic. That is completely untrue. Unfortunately, that's just a nice little marketing gimmick that they throw out. Right. 66 days is what it scientifically takes for what essentially could be called your lizard brain to take a habit and make it automatic. You don't have to think about it anymore. You will just wake up and automatically do that thing. That's not easy to do. It's not easy to do anything for 66 days. It doesn't even have to be consistent, but it has to be a strong correlation in an upward trend. So we're not looking for perfection, but we're looking for some quick growth there to make sure that happens. So what would you say is, in the final moment here, what would you say is just a quick actionable tip? I always tell people accountability. Yeah. Would you agree with that? Is there anything else you would say? Look, if you want to get started on something, start small, start now, and do this. What would it be? Pray. Oof, powerful. Faith.
Pray.
John.
Whether you believe or not, meditate, whatever it is. Pray, meditate, put your thoughts, put your trust in somebody else more powerful than you, and do your best. That's it.
I can't think of a better way to end it, my friend. So that is amazing. Will, thank you so much. Always fun chatting with you, my friend. Say hey to the wife and kiddos for me. And for everybody else, thank you so much for listening. If you want more interviews, you can go and check out the podcast. There's a lot more there. There's also individual episodes that are focused on helping to get you to that first 100K and then your first million. We have a system set up for that. You can go to the website, stephencourson.me. And you can sign up for the free newsletter that is all built on these practices. And until next, so I hope you've enjoyed this episode. And until our paths cross again.
Peace.
Boom. There we go. All right, my friend. Thank you. I know you got to go, man. That was beautiful. I'll get this edited and I'll let you know about. It'll be like a month or 6 weeks or something. I'll let you know. But we'll talk soon.
All right, bro. I'll talk to you
later, bud.
All right, peace.